Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we deal with Yuan, also known as Mongol China. We also deal with the successor states, the Ming and the Manchu. So, China, basically from 1270 to 1800. So what about Mongol Yuan China? Kublai Khan's China. This is the China of Kublai Khan. Could that conquer the world? Well, it is huge China. This is really the biggest, one of the biggest versions of China. It's going to absorb Mongolia, all of the Manchus, Tibet, some of the Vietnamese. It is really big. But it's part of Mongolia, which means it's a humiliation for all the people who got conquered. It connects China to the wider world. People and knowledge, equal diversity. The Islam, Christianity, Persian ideas are all going to come east. The Marco Polo, right? The Mongols were perfectly happy to bring in knowledge. Now, the Chinese weren't. The Chinese were the Middle Kingdom. The Chinese were the best people on earth. So they were perfectly fine with, like, yeah, you have smart ideas, you can keep them. We're more advanced than you. The Mongols, on the other ideas, would take ideas from everywhere. So gunpowder heads to the Middle East. The Mongols will take gunpowder and go to the Middle East and with the avowed aim of killing people, of blowing stuff up. There's also money, because there's no tariffs. Marco Polo will come east. Muslim slaves will be brought east. They'll bring knowledge on how to do things that the Mongols don't know how to do. There is money to be made because, like the Matrix, Yuan China is jacked into the larger economic world. It is large, wealthy, diverse, powerful, stable, cosmopolitan. It's outward-looking. It wants trade and it wants foreign expertise. When Marco Polo shows up, he is given a government job. When Muslim slaves show up, if they're smart enough, they are given government jobs. The Mongols are willing to tap into other people's expertise. But there's problems. As this is going on, Central Asia is being torn up. Those civil wars, trade, Muslim expertise is being lost. And for the Chinese mandarins, the people who used to be in charge, Chinese elites, Han elites, they don't like the Muslim experts coming in because they're losing their jobs. So they're perfectly happy with, like, keep the Muslims out. Keep them in the West. Keep them in the Middle East. But meanwhile, remember there's that Middle Eastern Mongolian kingdom, the Ilkhanate. They don't want their experts going to China. They don't want their experts making their cousin richer. They want to keep them. Because they're fighting these civil wars in Central Asia. And so what you have here is, for a little time, all of this is mixing. And then it's being broken up into pieces. And those pieces are not working with each other. They're actually working against each other. And with that, the Asian world is getting poorer. The second thing is, yeah, they might own China. But they're still occupiers. They're still terrorists. They still killed, murdered, or allowed to die some 30 million Chinese people. I mean, no matter how nice Kublai Khan or his successors are, they're still the people who burned down northern China. And it's too big for Mongolia to run it. So China needs to run itself. The Mongols don't know how to get farmers to farm. They're not farmers. They don't know how to run cities and trade. They just want it to work so they could skim off the top. So they could take the 10% off the top, 10, 15% off the top. That's not a bad thing. Lots of economics is going to work that way. We're going to see a lot of kings, a lot of economics work this way. In fact, A lot of free capitalism in Europe is going to work this way. Adam Smith is going to argue, don't regulate us. You can tax us, but don't regulate us. And the idea was, you can get your 15%, but let us do the work. Let businesses, let capitalism make the money. Now, Adam Smith is talking about absolute governments that might try to use the economy for their own benefit. The Mongols don't know how to run the economy. They don't know how to run cities. They don't know how to make farmers farm better. They don't know how to build canals. They're horse people. And so they need China to run itself, which means China has a lot of independence, which is bad for the Mongols because they're occupiers and terrorists. And yet, if you're Chinese, you could look around. If you're Han, you could look around and go, why do we need the Mongols? What is the Mongols doing? I'm running my business. I'm running the farms. We're making the trade. All they're doing is taking 15% off the top. Well, for a time, the Mongols are still scary, right? You don't want to mess with the Mongols because they might do something bad to you. But as time goes on, this becomes a social control problem. If China can run itself without the Mongols, why do we need the Mongols in charge? Why should we allow the Mongols to remain in charge? The third problem is Mongols are not populous. There's not a lot of them. And nomadic culture, with its nomadic structures, doesn't assimilate into China. China doesn't become more nomadic. The nomads become Chinese. And so the Mongols become Chinese. After 100 years, the Mongols become Chinese, which means they're not scary. And that allows a Chinese peasant revolt to overthrow the Mongols, kick them out, and create the Ming dynasty. And we see this in the art. If you're on the video, you can see this. Genghis Khan has a portrait done. He's the universal leader. He's in his white robes, white turban. He's got a nice little, hat, a long swooping hat, covering his head. Right? He's tan from being out in the sun all the time because he's a horse nomad. His grandson, Kublai Khan, which means ruler of change, is essentially the same. The art of Kublai Khan is without a doubt declaring he is related to Genghis Khan. Same mustache, same beard, same white turban robe. His hat is a little more colorful. Ooh, maybe you're getting a little richer, but still very clearly the same kind of portrait. When we get to the last of the Mongolian emperors, Toghon Timur, whose name means iron pot, which we'll talk about in a second, he's not looking like Kublai Khan. He is not looking like Genghis Khan. He is in Chinese robes with dragons on them. He's got a giant headdress with like a chandelier coming off of it. He's got stars and moons. He's got dragons coming out of his hat. He is painted white. He's got earrings. He's wearing silks. He is Chinese. He does not look any more like Genghis Khan or Kublai Khan. And his name means iron pot, which means he eats out of an iron pot, which you may laugh at. But what does that mean? It means he's civilized. The Mongols don't have iron. They're nomadic horse people. They eat barbecue. They eat over an open flame when they cook their meats. They don't make stews. They don't have the metallurgy. They don't have the foundries to melt the iron, to then pour it, to then cast it, to then beat it until you get all the impurities out. They don't have the chemistry. They don't have the physics. They don't have the science. So for Timur to be named Iron Pot is to tell you how civilized, how Chinese he is, even before you see the image of him. And the point of that is, if you're Chinese, if you're Han, why would you be scared of this guy? He looks, he acts, he speaks just like you. So, but he's a Mongolian who acts Chinese, looks Chinese, speaks Chinese, married to a Chinese woman. That's a guy who we don't have to be scared of. That's a guy we can get rid of. And that's going to be the Ming. Ming China. Ming China is the only China created by a peasant revolt in the south. It's created by a peasant revolt, so that's one thing. Two, it's southern China. The southern Chinese farmers revolting and then conquering northern China. That doesn't happen. This is the only time it happens. Why? Usually northern China conquers southern China. Why? Because southern China is full of farmers. South of the Yellow River, lots of farmers. Breadbasket of China. But north of the Yellow River, north of the Yangtze and the Yellow River, is hilly country. It's a frontier. It's fighting with nomads all the time. Like, you're tougher in the north because you have to be tougher. So when it comes to conquering China, it's usually these guys in the north who are like, oh, I'm tough. Those farmers are weak. They're just farmers. I'm going to go south and conquer them. This is the first time southerners in China conquer northerners. So what about the Ming? Can they conquer the world? So this is about 1440, 1439. Can they conquer the world? Well, we start with a good leader, a charismatic leader, Hyung Wu. Hongwu. He's a peasant warrior from southern China. We already discussed this is the first time the farmers of the south are going to conquer the more warlike peoples of the north. So this shows that the urban farming communities of the south have power. If the peasants can organize, if they can unify, they can overwhelm the tougher but less numerous groups in the north, Chinese or otherwise. Two, he's conservative. Well, it makes sense. He's a peasant. He wants a return to Chinese customs and purity. He wants to make China great again by going back to 1200, to going back to the Song, to go back before the Mongols showed up. So how do you do that? Well, you have a philosophy, Confucian. You take Confucian philosophy, boom, it becomes the mandate of the government. You emphasize loyalty and responsibility, which is what Confucianism does. Loyalty to China, loyalty to the Chinese emperor, responsibility. Everybody's got to pull their weight, which to a peasant works totally, because that's how being a peasant works. Part of the problem is the government is being run by Mongolians and Muslims from Western China and from the Middle East. Well, what do you got to do? You got to get rid of those people. Well, who are you going to replace them with? Who's going to run the government? So now you have to train Chinese. You have to retrain Chinese intellectuals, elites, basically, in a system of education that makes them ready for government service. And that will be called the Mandarin system. Mandarin. The Mandarin system. You get government workers educated and trained, and they're excellent. And they're Han, which means they're loyal to the Ming. They're loyal to Hyung Wu. So what Hyung Wu is going to do is, through the Mandarin system, which tests Confucianism, so it double reinforces the idea of loyalty and responsibility to China and the Chinese and the Han Chinese emperor. The government gets educated Han workers who can do the job government needs, that the people need government to do. So this is good. All right, good. Hyung Wu, or more importantly, the Ming, also need friends. And so this begins the explorations, the 7 voyages of Genghis Khan. Now, Hyung Wu is dead by this point. This is the Yongle Emperor. the third emperor, and Zheng He, which is Zhen, and his last name is He. He's a 7-foot tall Muslim eunuch. So he stands out in a crowd, right? But he's also a Muslim eunuch, which means some of these people of talent the Ming keep around. The Ming can't just throw all of them out because there's this transition period. And if they're willing to be loyal, all right, we'll keep him. Now, he's a eunuch, which means he can't have children, which means he's working for the emperor for pay. So he's loyal to the emperor because the emperor is paying him, which is good if you're emperor. You like having eunuchs around because the regular people don't like eunuchs. They're weird. They're eunuchs. So if something bad happens, you can hand over the eunuch and be like, well, beat this guy up. He told me to do what you hate. So they're a way of making sure the emperor can get away with doing bad things. So they're useful. But the Muslim part is important too. They're still around from the Yuan Empire, the Yuan dynasty, because they have talent. And so the Ming aren't dumb. The Ming aren't just about loyalty. They know they need the government system to work. And so the 7 voyages of Zheng He are about diplomacy. They are out there to announce. Remember, the world is conquered by the Mongols, from Russia to the Middle East to Central Asia. And so these voyages are going to go around to peoples who aren't conquered by the Mongols to say, we're free. We come to us. Come to China. We're open for business. We're not part of the Mongol world. We kick them out. Don't you worry. And so it's a way of creating trade connections around the Mongols, of not having to go through the Silk Road, of not having to go through Mongol territory to do it. It's a way of going around them. It's also discovery. It's to find a bigger world, because China has been cut off for 100 years from the wider world. They don't know who's out there. They don't know which empires matter. It's the map is blank, except for the Mongol part. Like, they know the Mongol part, and they're not Mongols, so they're like, well, what is the rest of the world like? And so it is about discovery. Are these voyages impressive? Yeah, they are. Fork, yeah, they are. These are massive fleets, 300 ships. 60 what's called treasure ships. The treasure ships are like capital ships. They're like the aircraft carriers of today. They're 5 times the size of Columbus's ships. There's 30,000 sailors, Marines who are specialized to fight at sea. So they fight pirates. They fight in boarding tactics. They fight at forts on the shore. You have specialized ships. So there's tender ships, mail ships, water ships, horse ships. This is equivalent to a modern carrier group that goes on and shows power. So the Ming have it. The Ming can afford this. They have the people. They have the ships. They have the specialization to have specialized ships. Columbus doesn't have that. He's got 3 ships. They all do the same thing. The Ming fleets could have discovered, if they had gone east, America. Had they gone around to Africa, they could have discovered Spain. Ming armies could have defeated European armies. Certainly could have defeated Native American armies in, say, California. India was wrecked. They could have carved out an empire there. The Middle East was in shambles had they wanted to go up the Red Sea. The Ming were rich and growing stronger. So they got the ingredients. They're rich. They're smart. They're willing to tap into foreign expertise. They can get to faraway places. They are way in advance of their competitors. This is the ingredients you need to conquer the world. So can the Ming conquer the world? I don't know, but they look like they can. They certainly have the ingredients for it. And yet there's a but. There's a bunch of buts. And the first is, those massive fleets cost money. They don't make money. Unlike Columbus or Vasco da Gama, the fleets, Zheng He's fleets don't make money for China. They don't create long-term overseas trade for a couple of reasons. One is the other people they're connecting to don't have large fleets that can reach China and go around the Mongols. The second thing is China's a producer, not a buyer. It makes the silk, it makes the spices, it makes the tea. It doesn't buy stuff from other people. And so even if you have coffee in Ethiopia, China doesn't want it. So why would you go all the way to China? If you're going to China, you have to buy Chinese goods, luxury goods, and bring them back. So you have to go at cost, buy stuff at cost, then return home at cost, and then, only then, try to recoup your money. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. There's a reason why the Silk Road was overland and not by sea. And China wanted the silver. It wants people's silver, which people do not want to give up because they like using silver to buy armies with. They don't want to use it to buy pleasure stuff, silks and spices and teas. You know, that's nice. But I want silver and gold. That buys me an army. And yet that's what China wants. China doesn't have silver, so what it wants is silver. So if you go to China to buy goods, to try to sell them back home, you got to have the money up front. You're not going to make it by selling your own stuff, then taking that profit, turning around, buying Chinese stuff, and then taking it home. So there's no economic incentive to go. There's no economic incentive to have Africa or India or Southeast Asia create the large fleets that can create international trade with China. And China has no incentive to keep coming back to Africa, India, or Southeast Asia. Their feeling is we have all the stuff we need. The other thing is the Ming are not going to win the world because of the trauma of the Mongols. That trauma is going to create conservatism. After the death of the Yongle Emperor and then the death of Zheng He, that's the end of the fleet. There is no more. So if you had an emperor who wanted to go by sea, who wanted to create the fleet, you could do it. But most emperors don't. It's expensive. And they have a bigger problem. And their bigger problem is, what if the Mongols come back? There's an obsession in Eastern China, East Asia really, that the Mongols are going to come back. They have to come back. They're too tough not to come back. And so that conservatism, that xenophobia, that trauma of what the Mongols did, and remember, the Mongols killed 30 million Han Chinese. They're going to wreck Korea. Nobody wants them to come back. Is going to make that instead of make the Chinese emperor, instead of building fleets to engage in trade overseas, it's going to put its money into the Great Wall, into a giant 2,000-mile wall to separate northern China from the nomadic peoples, the Manchus, the Yurkins, and the Mongols, the Mongol Turks. The Manchus in the northeast, the Yurkins in the north center, the Mongols and Turks in the northwest. The East Asian Turks, by the way, because we're going to talk about Turks later, and these are different Turks. Now, what effect does that have? Well, one, it costs a boatload of money. It costs a lot of money to build that wall. And then you have to you just can't build it. You have to maintain it. You have to man it. You have to put soldiers there out on the frontier in the middle of nowhere. So you have to pay those guys a lot. You have to constantly maintain the wall because the earth changes. There's earthquakes. There's floods. There's people digging underneath it. There's people trying to go over it. It wears away with rain and snow. So it costs a lot of money, and it's continuously costing money. The second thing is The modern Great Wall, this is the wall that you want to go and visit. The modern Great Wall closes off trade to the north and the west. It effectively puts a gate where the Silk Road used to be. The Ming, with the building of the Great Wall, are essentially saying to the West, we're closing down our shop. We're closing down the highway. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Central Asia is closed. Because with the Great Wall, that's the end of Chinese power. They're saying this is the limit. So you go past that Great Wall, you are on your own. And think about this. In a world without credit, you had to carry all of your money with you. So you want to go trade with Central Asia? And let's start with most of those cities are destroyed. But let's say you're like, oh, I'm going to reestablish the Silk Road. Well, then you have to take your cart, load it up with silk, which is worth, say, $1 million. Then you have to have your year's worth of money to buy food, to buy shelter, to buy goods to bring back east to China, to sell in China. So you need another. So you have $1 million worth of goods. You're going to need another $1 million to handle your costs. Now, in the old days, you were protected by the Tang, the Han, the Tang, the Song, until you reached the Islamic kingdoms of Central Asia and the West, and then you paid them and they took over. You don't have that anymore. Now you've got nomads running all over the place. You've got Mongols running all over the place. Until you get to Persia, you got problems of control, of being stolen from, of being murdered, and all your money and all your stuff taken. And so, are you really going to change? Are you really going to go cross that Great Wall? Or are you just going to find someone in China who will buy your stuff? And the answer is, you stay home. You set up a small little shop in Beijing. Or the capital, Nanjing. Nanjing. Nanjing, the southern capital. You set up a little shop. Because you know you're going to be protected there. Why? Because, yes, there's the Great Wall on the border, 1,000 miles to the north. But Nanjing, the capital, is going to have 60-foot tall walls. Now, I have to tell you how insane that is. Remember, city walls are built to keep out horses. A 10-foot wall is enough. Horses can't climb walls. You build a 10-foot wall, you're pretty good. Now, you might want to go a little bigger than a 10-foot wall because you could build, a ladder pretty much that can go over a 10-foot wall. But the nomads don't like getting on those ladders. They like staying on their horses. So, you build a 15-foot wall, you're pretty good. You're pretty safe. A 60-foot tall wall is out of panic, is out of trauma. It is saying, if the Mongols break through the Great Wall in the north, 1,000 miles south of there, we will build a place that can protect the emperor, that can protect China, that will hold out against the Mongols. We are going to build 60-foot tall walls that are going to be, 30 feet thick, that will withhold a siege. Now that makes sense for Beijing, the northern capital, which is on the border, which is not far from the Great Wall. That makes sense. 60-foot tall walls, if you expect to be invaded again, makes sense when you're on the border for a border town. 60-foot tall walls in Nanjing makes no sense unless you are traumatized. Unless you are so afraid the Mongols are going to come back, and they're going to come back with Genghis Khan. They're going to come back and just overwhelm everything. Right down 1,000 miles to get to Nanjing. The other thing they're going to build is the Forbidden City in Beijing, Beijing. They're going to build the Forbidden City because, remember, there's the worry about the Mongols coming back. The Mongols are in the north, the northwest. And so the idea is Beijing is the place where the emperor is going to have to be. Nanjing is the most important city. It's the capital. It's the southern capital. It's the economic center. It's the New York. But Beijing is where the emperor has to live if he's going to lead the armies, if the Mongols ever come back. He can't be in Nanjing. It's too far away. It's 1,000 miles away. He can't command armies from 1,000 miles away. And the emperor is the only one with the legitimacy to really command armies in a panic, in a trauma. If the Mongols come back in a 5-alarm fire, you need the emperor to be there. All right. So how do we protect the emperor? Because if the Mongols come over the Great Wall, they're going to run into, there's not much stopping them until they hit Beijing. That's okay. It's designed that way. But what happens if they break through the walls of Beijing? Uh-oh, now the emperor could be murdered. Aha. Architects realize this and go, we will build a forbidden city. We will build a castle, a city within a city. So the idea of the forbidden city is the emperor gets locked away, is a city within a city. The idea is the Mongols attack Beijing. They may break through the walls of Beijing and then run rampant through the streets of Beijing, and they're going to want to kill the emperor, and they're going to run smack dab into another section of 30-foot tall walls. And inside those 30-foot tall walls is another city, like a Russian nesting doll. That is perfectly independent. It has its own water supply. It's got its own food supply. It is the safe room. The Forbidden City is China's safe room, so that the emperor can be safe. If all goes bad, the emperor can be safe until an army shows up from the south to save him. The idea is the emperor must be alive. And so we'll wall him off. Now, the advantage of that is, if China is ever attacked by the Mongols, the emperor will be safe. The problem with that is, it becomes real easy for the emperor to not have to deal with anybody anymore. He's locked within the Forbidden City that has gates. How easy is it to get through those gates? Can you just meet the emperor anymore? Nope. Can you petition the emperor for him to help you with a grievance? Nope. How much news gets to the emperor? How much pleasure is in this city? Well, it all depends on the emperor. But it's very easy for a very rich leader to be like, so is everything cool? And all of his yes men say, yes, everything's great. We've done everything you've asked. And he goes, great. I guess I'll go into the sex palace and have fun. And they're like, no worries, sir. We totally have this. We're running China for you. If anything bad happens, we'll let you know. And even a decent emperor will go, okay, I guess I'll just go and hang out for a while. And if something bad, you'll let me know, right? And they're like, yes, no problem. Go, have fun. You're a young emperor. You'll be fine. And so it's just very easy for the emperor to lose touch with people, with news, with China. He's way in the north, and he's in a safe room inside a northern city far away from where most people live. He's not in touch. So if there's a famine 2,500 miles away in Sichuan, he may never know about it. But if you've seen Mulan, you know that the people will blame the emperor. They'll be like, yo, emperor, come and help us. And if the emperor doesn't, they will blame him for that. That's his job. The next point about why the Ming won't conquer the world is there's a fight between the Muslim eunuchs and the Confucian Han. The Muslim eunuchs, while useful, while knowledgeable, are not Confucian Han Chinese. And the Han Chinese don't like them. They're competition. And so, while the Yongle Emperor will hire them because of their expertise, future emperors will be told by the Confucians, like, hey, send these guys away. Don't use them as servants. Don't put them in charge of stuff. They're foreigners. They're not really Chinese. And so what happens is they don't get the best jobs. And so their skills in government wither away. And so by 1900, they're a joke. They're still there. But they're if you ever watch The Last Emperor, they're the people who take care of the child emperor. And he throws rotten food at them. He throws feces at them. He makes them do humiliating things. He treats them like dogs for him to laugh at. Now, he's a 5-year-old. But this is what's happened to the Muslim eunuchs. They are so humiliated. They are used as these kind of jokes, as daycare. And remember, Zheng He goes on 7 journeys around the Indian Ocean. These were serious guys. And by 1900, they're jokes. Nobody takes them seriously. And so what we see is a Ming closing themselves off from the world. And that leads to their destruction. Because while they're closing themselves off to the world, while they're shutting down their factories, while they're letting the ships rot that could have discovered America, the northern barbarians, those nomadic horse people, are getting their act together. And it's not the Mongols. The Mongols have spent their energy. They have diversed. They are too weak. They are too small. But a new group, the Manchus, in the hilly country of Manchuria, straight north of Korea, are going to be the next great nomadic conquerors. And they're going to come over the wall. They're going to be invited over the wall. They're going to come over the wall. They're going to conquer China. And they're going to create the last imperial dynasty of China. And that will be our next episode.